Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of my live show, The Difficulty Adjustment. I'm joined here by co host Claudia Sotomayor, who is Audio's head of operations. Hello, Claudia, how are you?
Hola, Gustavo. Happy to be here for another episode. We have a lot of things to talk about. I'm excited.
Y- Yeah, this was a very big week, so let's get right into it. So, the main things we're going to talk about this week is the news that shook me the most in the past few days is the
Hmm.
fact that Ukraine has struck an Iranian vessel that was crossing the Caspian Sea. Their claim is that this vessel was going to supply drones to Russia to be used against Ukraine. This happened about 3 4 days ago. Iran immediately um, said that they were going to retaliate. However, this morning they've already pulled back, and it seems like they're not going to. Another important news is the fact that uh, the U.S. and Iran have stopped shooting at each other for the past four
Hmm.
days. However, they have now the war has now expanded into the Red Sea. So now Yemen and Saudi Arabia, specifically the Houthis in Yemen and Saudi Arabia, are fighting each other as they had from 2015 to 2022. Now they have
Hmm.
restarted after many years of pause. They have restarted the Saudi Houthi war, and Saudi Arabia is even getting attacked from the north by Iraqi militias. So
Hmm.
this is independent from the U.S. Iran war and also independent from the Israeli wars as well, right? And
Hmm.
also, another major news is that the Ukraine has also expanded the war into the Black Sea. So it seems to be that the goal is to detach Crimea from Russia, and it seems to be succeeding. This morning, both Zelensky and Netanyahu were in Washington to talk to Trump, probably to convince him to push the war efforts even further. And I think this is just so interesting as news items, and it all relates to Bitcoin in the end, but we're gonna get to that in a second.
Yeah, there's a lot to unpack there. A lot to unpack. A lot of things happening in a very small area of the world, and they all seem to be disconnected, but they're not. They interplay together. Yeah.
Precisely. So, first, the main takeaway, the main headline news is the fact that Ukraine has attacked Iran. So the deal, the reality is that Ukraine has struck a Iranian ship that was crossing, like I said, the Caspian Sea. So this comes after probably days of Ukraine starting to hint at the fact that Iran has been helping out Russia in its war against Ukraine, right? So, um, like
But
I
hold
said,
on.
yeah,
But hold on. So, okay, they hit an Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea because allegedly Iran is helping Russia. I mean, lots of countries are helping Russia in different things. Like, like, to me, this seems a provocation more than a defensive thing. You know what I mean? Like, purposefully escalating and trying to get Iran to be involved with them too.
right. Well, 100%. To me, the my take is that this is an attempt at getting the United States more involved in the Ukraine-Russia war, right? By basically saying that Russia and Iran are interlinked in the Ukraine war. They can, and they've also been claiming the same back in the opposite direction, saying that Russia has been helping Iran in the Iranian war. They're basically signaling to Donald Trump and to the U.S. that their war against Iran is actually a war against Russia too,
I
right?
see. Like, so that would be like the axis right there. Like, these two countries are joined in defenses and in offense too, sort
Exactly,
of.
right. And
Okay.
even I'd say that Zelensky even takes it further. Yesterday he did an interview where he says that they're fighting Russia, but Iran is supplying missiles and drones to Russia. North Korea is supplying 30,000 men to fight in the Ukrainian-Russian war,
In the front.
and
Yeah.
China is also helping Russia with intelligence. and I believe even material for weapons. So Zelensky has made it clear what he sees as the axis of this war: Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China. And
Hmm.
he probably wants to, and he was in Washington this morning, probably pitching to Trump the idea that these two wars are interlinked, and
Hmm.
the United States should keep supporting Ukraine for sure. That is the first thing, because Trump has at some times doubted his support
Right,
for Ukraine,
right.
and then second, to probably let him know that Russia and Iran are just the same enemies. So anything that Trump can do against Russia helps him in his Iranian
Hmm.
war, in the sense that anything that Ukraine can do against Iran also helps the United States and Ukraine against its war on against Russia, right? So
And
that is
then,
the pitch here.
do you know, is that public when you say that Zelensky wants to get the US more involved, is are they coming out public with what that means? Like, are they requesting more money? Are they requesting like the US declare formally a war against Russia? What is it that they want?
Right. So there's multiple things that they want, okay? And they're getting some of those things. So the first thing that they want and they're getting is letting Ukraine produce interceptors inside their territory, okay? And this was actually, so this is called a license for for manufacturing Patriot systems inside Ukraine. And this
Okay.
was actually granted to Ukraine at the July 8th NATO summit. So just 20 days ago, this was Trump announced that the United States would authorize Ukraine to build these interceptor systems inside its territory. Okay, so
I
the first
see.
one is just
Okay.
military weaponry. The second one is also, of course, getting more aid. There's no That is probably unsuccessful for now, right? Ukraine is not getting new major aid packages, but that's always wanted. There's also another one, which is that Ukraine is proposing an air ceasefire to Russia and via Washington. So
Hmm.
that is another interesting point. But I do think that Ukraine hitting Iran one day, the next day, talking about how Iran, Russia, North Korea, and China are the same axis of evil fighting Ukraine, are part of the same coalition, and then the day after going to see Trump is not a coincidence, right? I
Right.
think this timeline kind of signals that Ukraine wants to build a narrative that Russia, Iran, North Korea, and China are all at war with Ukraine and the West,
Right.
and to basically get Trump to expand his war efforts, expand his support for Ukraine. Like Trump will definitely, if he agrees to this thesis, he will send the United States will send more money to Ukraine, will send more support to Ukraine. That is probably the first goal,
Yeah.
right? And that's probably
Yeah.
going to be successful. Another thing that is really interesting that has come out in the news is that Trump has a different perception of the Ukraine war, and as I do, okay, as many do,
Hmm.
okay, we used to assume, Trump used to assume that Ukraine was going to lose, so it just had to
Right.
concede. Let's find a
Right.
deal because you're going to lose, right? That's what
Right. Right.
the Zelensky visit meant.
Right. And but Zelensky was talk. I remember Zelensky talking, and I was so surprised because he would be threatening Trump, saying, "You need to help me now because if you don't help me now, it's gonna be worse for you later." And talking, seeing the war as a microcosm of a much larger war. Zelensky never saw the Ukraine conflict, the way that he was talking, as just like, "Oh, this is just a Ukraine conflict." He saw it as like way bigger than just Ukraine,
And maybe he was right. Okay,
and maybe
maybe
he
he
was
was
right.
right because uh, okay, first of all, what I was saying is that Trump now sees Ukraine as having more success, right? Willing
Mm-hmm.
is hitting deeper into Russia. Is now the war has expanded to the Black Sea. Crimea is getting isolated. The energy infrastructure of Crimea is getting isolated from Russia. Every energy shipment to Crimea is getting bombed by Ukraine. Ukraine's
Okay.
even able to hit Iran in the Caspian Sea, right? So
Yeah.
that is definitely force. And
Right.
Trump, first of all, Trump likes to see force, right? Respects you when you
He respects that. He respects for power, definitely.
right.
Yeah.
And now the Ukraine war started. Trump wasn't even the Trump administration started. He wasn't concerned about a war that implicated directly the United States. Now he is, right now the United States is in a direct war with Iran, so he is very concerned about that. So this is a great moment for Zelensky to pitch him on the idea of increase the war surface, support us, because by supporting us, you're actually fighting Iran,
Hmm.
right? And trying to uh, disappear the line between Russia and Iran, and even hinting at China as well.
I see. That's yeah, that's crazy. That's crazy. Like, yeah, okay.
Yeah, but of course Trump's not going to go for it, right? Like,
Hmm.
there's no way he wants to get into trouble with Russia, with a direct confrontation with Russia or China, considering how much trouble he's having just with Iran.
I
So
mean, China's not openly saying we're taking a position. Obviously, they are affected by the supply shock from Iran because they get a lot of their oil from them. But China hasn't declared anything like, oh, we're publicly supporting Iran in this war effort, right?
no, they haven't, but they
Okay.
have declared support for Iran's sovereignty, right? You can
Hmm.
see the language, right? Plus, we
Right.
know that Iran and China are allies. Uh,
Hmm.
China said, I believe this morning or yesterday, that they have talked to the Houthis and that they have negotiated directly with the Houthis the cross through the Red Sea Strait. Okay, so now China,
Okay.
which doesn't recognize the Houthis as the legit government in Yemen,
Hmm.
publicly signals that they had to ask permission or get a deal
Yeah.
with the Houthis, right? So,
Okay.
so yeah, indirectly, they're not coming out so much in support of Iran as Russia is, for example,
Mm-hmm.
but they're definitely hinting. They're definitely still doing a lot of business with Iran. They're
Yeah.
probably sharing intelligence with Iran, and they're also hinting that they respect the Iranian proxies as leaders of the geopolitical new reality, right? Hinting that the Houthis do actually exert power on the Red Sea Strait. That is a huge evolution from simply ignoring the Houthis, saying the Houthis are simply not
Mm-hmm.
the recognized government of Yemen. Probably a next step would be to recognize the Houthis as the real government of Yemen. So yeah,
So let me,
China's not involved, but
but
definitely benefiting from this and definitely
mhm.
following every step.
Okay. So you're saying that by Ukraine bombing the Iranian ship in the Caspian Sea, what they're trying to get is becoming coming under that NATO fold of having NATO labeled weaponry being made in Ukraine, because Ukraine technically still not in NATO, right? That's how this whole thing started. Or are they
Well,
in NATO officially now?
no, they're not.
They're
Yeah,
not
no,
exactly.
right. They're kind of trying to sell the idea that yeah, they're sort of in NATO, right? Or at least
Hmm.
they're the Ukrainian war. They're fighting the same enemy as the United
Hmm.
States is fighting, right? So
Hmm.
support. I think the main message is support us, keep supporting us, support us more because we
Hmm.
are fighting the same enemy you are fighting.
Yeah.
Uh, whether of course his dream would be to get American troops fighting directly Russian troops, American the US declaring war to Russia. That would be
Hmm.
Zelensky's dream, but he's not getting that. But he's happy with getting more money and getting more licenses from the United States,
Hmm.
and he's getting the licenses. We'll see about the money, but he's getting definitely more. He has more leverage now with Trump than he had at any point,
Because
probably since the war started.
right, for me, like when the Ukraine war started, I thought this was gonna be short because obviously Russia is way more powerful. I thought it was gonna be very short-lived, but no, it's been what, like 4+ years now, and the tide seems to be turning. But I still don't think it's enough for Ukraine to decisively win. They can make Russia bleed and vice versa. So they need somebody like America to get involved to end the conflict. Would you say that?
Yeah, definitely. Like this, or not necessarily end the conflict, right? Because look, maybe they want, maybe they're willing to get into a deal, right? Maybe they're just
Hmm.
trying to exert force and support to get Moscow to concede, right? Like, would
Hmm.
Zelensky take a deal Moscow concedes, of course, they would
Okay.
absolutely take that deal. Putin's never going to do that. But
Hmm.
yeah, Zelensky might entertain the idea that by getting the US behind it, he's pulling Putin closer towards a deal, right? So
Hmm.
either that or we keep on fighting forever. And as long as we have US and European support, or we allow, or eventually the war grows into becoming the same war instead of two separate wars, then maybe eventually you do get US direct confrontation to Russia. So yeah, that is probably the idea here.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm. How do you connect all of this to Bitcoin?
Well, for me, the easiest one to connect to Bitcoin was the Strait of Hormuz, right? The
Hmm.
Iranian war, because even Iran themselves said that they were going to take Bitcoin as a form of payment for
Hmm.
toll fees on the Strait of Hormuz, right? So
Right.
by saying that, Iran is confirming that Bitcoin is a monetary asset that can be used in replacement of the dollar to exchange energy for currency, right? So
Hmm.
and that's exactly what Bitcoin is for me. It's a monetary asset that can be used for global trade and energy trade, like the US dollar is being used now, like the British pound was
Hmm.
used in its time, or the Spanish real was used a couple centuries ago.
Hmm.
Bitcoin could also become a global reserve currency that is used for global trade and energy trade, right?
Hmm.
And here, I subscribe to Ray Dalio's theory that we are witnessing uh, probably the end of the current world order era, and we are
Hmm.
entering a conflict moment, which will eventually decide what is going to be that new global order, right? Kind of similar to how World War II was kind of the World War II had direct impact on what was negotiated or what was told in Bretton Woods in 1944, which then led
Hmm.
to the establishment of the global monetary order, right? Because
Hmm.
whoever
Right.
controls the waterways controls the security of the global trade, specifically of the
Right.
energy trade, and can decide the currency that that global trade is going to be paid on, which then makes every country buy its debt instead of its currency to get a yield on the currency, and which then allows that country that has established the world reserve currency system to run constant deficits and to export inflation like the United States has done for decades already, right? So I do subscribe to the idea that we are in the shift to a new global order, and I think the Strait of the Iranian war is might just be the final battle, which how Ray Dalio describes it too, because it is simply so um, it can have just so much it can determine it can be so deterministic, right? The United States
Right.
losing the Strait of Hormuz signals to the entirety of the world that the United States in reality doesn't isn't able to exert military power to control global trade, and which would lead every country to even question the fact that they're buying US debt and US and using US currency for trade, right? So
Right.
and yeah, the Ukrainian war is not exactly like a naval war as much as the Iranian war. However, it is expanding to potentially be one, right? With the fact
Right.
that I said that the Black Sea is becoming more part of is actively becoming a battleground in this war. The fact that Ukraine hit the Iranian vessels in the Caspian Sea, the rumors that the Baltic Sea could also become part of this war by involving other countries in the region, if it
Hmm.
ever expanded to become Russia versus NATO.
Hmm.
Um, so in the end, in my opinion, all these wars are probably gonna stack up over the next few years, and at some point, we are gonna see winners and losers, and the winners
Hmm.
are gonna determine that no new global order, a similar type of 1944 moment for in Bretton Woods, Massachusetts,
Hmm.
a similar moment would come to arise, which would define what is the new monetary order. And I think Bitcoin plays a massive role in it. And countries like Iran and Russia are already signaling
Right.
that they're already using Bitcoin as money. So so I do think that in the end it all ties back to geopolitics, always ties back to money,
Hmm.
and Bitcoin is that superior money that could have a front seat in the new global geopolitical order.
Right. Right. No, I mean, with Hormuz, what's at stake is the entire uh, MO of how the financial system works today, right? Like the entire system we have is resting on who's gonna control Hormuz. And I think we are talking about this earlier, right? Like both sides are equally motivated to not stop fighting. Like they cannot give this up. The incentive to fight is stronger than the incentive to let it go. Um, and I did have a question about this, and maybe we can tie it up, and that'll be the end of this topic. But Gustavo, the United States is the only country in all of this entire conflict that is fighting a war on the other side of the world, right? For Iran, this is a local conflict. For Ukraine, this is a local conflict. For Russia too. So the financial burden is the highest to me, from my perspective, is highest on the in the United States. So the financial and economic instability that comes from this also puts pressure, uh, to go to a Bitcoin standard, right? Like the effects are not just from the Hormuz and petrodollar situation. Um, but right now the dollar is not the only reserve currency, is the main one, sure, but there's others. However, yes, it's definitely like at the top, is the apex currency. Do you see Bitcoin being one, an equal one of multiple reserves currency, or do you see Bitcoin kind of like one for one replacing the dollar, being the strongest prominent one?
My thesis doesn't. I don't think my thesis needs to go as far as to say
Oh,
that Bitcoin becomes the main global reserve currency. Although
mm-hmm,
I think it definitely has a shot at becoming it.
mm-hmm,
But yeah, but Bitcoin becoming one of the main trade reserve currencies, that to me seems to be more certain every day, right?
mm-hmm,
So that in the end is my optimistic thesis for Bitcoin. Why I think Bitcoin is going to be worth millions of dollars is because
mm-hmm,
we're already seeing powers like Iran and Russia signaling that they're going to use Bitcoin for its neutral characteristics, right?
mm-hmm,
It's literally the only way to send $1 billion or $10 billion from one side of the planet to the other and have no counterparty risk attached to it, right? Yes, Iran tried to do that with stablecoins. Those stablecoins got frozen. Iran
mm-hmm,
also mostly trades um, with China in the Chinese system, but
mm-hmm.
they understand that that is completely controlled by China, right? So
Yeah.
I do think that at least some countries, I don't think China can replicate the model that the United States has set in the world and
Mm-hmm,
simply have Chinese bases all over the world. I think
mm-hmm,
it can have a very large area of influence. The United States too, and some countries in between. At least those will choose Bitcoin as the currency they trade in. But whether we're just gonna sort of arrive to like a multipolar order where an agreement is made that Bitcoin could serve as this neutral asset that allows us to go back to peace times. Yeah, that I think is possible too. But on the base case, it's used by multiple countries that don't want to subscribe to either the Chinese global order or the U.S. global order, right? So
right.
the countries that are found sort of in between the two centers of power.
Mm. So, what about that military shakeup in Ukraine? How does that tie in with this involvement of Iran?
Right. I'm not sure how it ties in, right? So it's not like I can tell you that this had a direct effect on this. What I know is that Ukraine had its biggest military leadership change, at least since 2 years, and probably the biggest shakeup since the war started. So Zelensky dismissed his commander in chief, uh, Ziritsky, I think his name is, about a week ago on July 21st. Okay,
Okay.
and he replaced him with a way younger general, right? Ziritsky, the one that got removed, represented a more traditional command culture, when was criticized by some troops for excessive losses.
Hmm.
Drapatiji, the new one, is associated
Hmm.
with a younger generation, faster battlefield adaptation, drones,
Hmm.
decentralized initiatives,
Hmm.
closer integration between technology and operations, right? So
Okay.
it's sort of a just a shift of mentality, and the next phase will not be fought simply like the Ukraine war so far was fought mostly as an attritional land war, right? Uh,
Right.
and that's what we've seen over the past few years. What we've seen over the past 2 months is Ukraine mostly running an air campaign, right? Fighting Russia very deeply inside, even hitting Iran. So that to me demonstrates that the goal is now to compensate for the manpower disadvantage through deep strikes, drones, asymmetric operations, right? Probably get the Black Sea involved, probably a big operation in uh, in the Crimea. That's also
Hmm.
been Crimea seems to be getting more and more attention. Destabilizing Crimea already an objective in effect, but a more intense campaign on Crimea can definitely become a thing too, right? So I think the military
Mm.
shakeup simply frames the next phase of the war is no longer just an attrition war where you send some guys over, they get killed by drones, and then you're basically always in defense because as soon as you
Right.
come out, the drones attack you. So there's
Hmm.
very little movement in the attrition war, but maybe
Hmm.
Ukraine can have more impact through a more extensive and more technological air campaign, which seems to be the strategy they've chosen already over the past few weeks. So I think it's more
Mm.
like the leadership change adapts to the conditions that have already been deployed on the ground.
I see. I see. Yeah. Um, no comment.
Yeah, well, we can
Yeah.
change topics. So,
Yeah.
like to me, this these words, I don't. People call me say sometimes that I'm a bit of a doomer, but and maybe I am, but it's not that I am. It's just that I've studied history, and my understanding of history is that, like the Ray Dalio thesis, like the Ray Dalio book says,
Mm.
there's simply cycles to human history, right?
Hmm.
Um, yes, an empire that rises like the United States because of its military superiority, because of its cultural superiority, which has been demonstrated in the United States for decades, eventually, with his top position, can run deficits forever, right? Can run because there's always gonna be a buyer of its debt, right? And that's what we've
Right.
been witnessing. However, as you and I know, the United States debt is now at unsustainable levels, right?
Right.
And the debt buyers are just decreasing. Um,
Right. As the debt is going up and the need for printing money is going up, there's fewer and fewer people willing to buy that. So the
exactly.
gradient is getting bigger.
And the
Yeah.
wars simply accelerate
Right.
the need to print and get more indebted, right? And this is
Hmm.
because the because no, first of all, the other powers have
Yeah.
strengthened. This is just a fact, right?
Hmm.
If you see at the GDP growth of Russia since 2000 and 2025, China in 2000 and 2025, that is a massive growth. uh,
Massive success story. Massive success story. I mean, kudos to
for,
them. Hats off. They've done amazing.
exactly, right, mostly for
Yeah.
China, but Russia
Yeah.
also.
Yeah.
So the enemies are growing stronger. The United States is fighting wars over the past 25 years that it's simply not able to win. Iraq, Afghanistan, right? And
Hmm.
now we are in for a new round of those wars. Even the Yemeni war, which was not officially a war, the Houthis are in power. The United States didn't achieve its objectives,
Hmm.
and the Houthis are more powerful than ever. And now we're fighting Iran, and it's simply undefeated, right? And yes, Iran hurts a lot, but it can take, it can hurt, it can sustain pain way more than the United States can, right? So,
Hmm.
so the printing is simply gonna keep going, right? And the
Hmm.
buyers of foreign debt, they're simply decreasing because who no everybody's watching and everybody's seeing the United States unable to beat a middle power. The Iran is
Right.
not a global power, and the United States, which is supposed to be the biggest military in the world, cannot beat it.
Hmm.
It's as simple as that, right? And
Right.
that is, to me, that, and plus fiscally, it's becoming more unsustainable as a
Hmm.
system, right? So naturally, if you only look at it from a financial point of view,
Hmm.
United States debt becomes more less attractive with time as the fiscal posture becomes more unsustainable. But then add on top the fact that you know that to protect its system, it has to fight those wars, it has to
Right.
keep on printing, so it becomes even more unsustainable as a system. And this has happened repeatedly throughout history. This is what the Ray Dalio thesis lays out, right? Plus, that's even without talking about the technological war that's going on with AI, without talking about the internal conflict inside the United States and in most Western countries that they don't seem
Hmm.
to have in the other side of the world, right?
Right. Right.
They seem to have a very one of their best cultural moments in China, and we seem to
Hmm.
have one of our worst. So,
Right.
and this is all laid out in the book,
Hmm.
right? Or you
And
can find the video on YouTube as well that describes that, right? So I subscribe to that thesis, and to
hmm.
me, we're just watching it play. And Ray Dalio doesn't mention it. But well, he mentions that he's mostly buying gold right now, and I'm mostly buying Bitcoin.
Hmm.
Although I do believe in gold too, but I do
Yeah.
think that is the answer here. In these moments, you want to hold on to assets that have no counterparty risks,
Right.
particularly no country as a counterparty risk.
Right. Uh, I'm not I mean, I'm not super familiar with the Ray Dalio thesis, but I'm sure he must be making like Roman Empire parallels, right? With excessive taxation and waging campaigns like really far away from the center of power. Because I mean, I look at America and I love America, but I'm like, with all the intelligence and all the resources that they have, they cannot seem to win to pick a winning side when entering into a conflict. Like the last few conflicts have all been like terrible, and the benefits somewhat unclear. Because for example, in the first Gulf War in the 90s, like that was a 2 week thing, in out, mission accomplished. Uh, Saddam Hussein got pushed back, done. But with this Iran conflict in the last few, they're quagmires and they just bleed to death in those conflicts and makes the nation and the society and the country just weaker overall. And with this Iran conflict, it was promised as a 2 week thing, and they're basically shown the world what you said, like we cannot defeat a middle power. So if we cannot defeat Iran, how far does that weakness go? You know, other people are gonna push and defy orders and guidelines, right? So yeah, the petrodollar system has never been weaker than at this point, I would say.
Exactly. You know, if I'm an Asian country right now, and I was really betting on the U.S. coming to save me if China tried to make a move on me, let's say Taiwan, I'm
Mm-hmm.
really doubting it right now. I'm seeing the United States fighting a proxy war in Russia and Ukraine and a direct war in Iran, and having struggling a lot. Okay. So how are they gonna sustain a third front in the Asian Pacific, right? Um, that's when a lot of countries that's when things can go gradually then suddenly, right?
Right.
That's when a lot of this can trigger very fast, right? People are telling me all the time, but look, U.S. As a global currency remains the very high. It even bounced back from last year. 2025 bounced back from 2024.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, But like Bitcoin and like many of these things, I do think they can follow a gradually then suddenly trajectory, right? And I do think this is probably what we're going to witness over the next few years. For example, China making a move on Taiwan and the United States simply being unable to react to it or unwilling, right? Then
Right.
you also jump into the fact that the United States population is completely unwilling to get involved in a long term war, to go fight wars the other side of the world. Because why would they? Why would you fight a war the other side of the world? It doesn't make sense unless you are an empire that depends on having control of or defending the global trade routes. And that is actually what allows you to have such a good lifestyle in the United States, right? The United people
Hmm.
maybe they don't connect both ends.
Right.
Um, when in reality, Trump here is defending the dollar in Iran. That is the whole point, and he's unsuccessfully defending it. So if few years pass by and no change happens, the United States will simply pull back and demonstrate to the whole planet that it cannot win these wars, so it cannot defend the dollar system. So why would people keep buying its debt and keep holding its dollars, right? Why instead they look at the rising powers, the one that
Hmm.
hasn't been involved in a war in
Right.
40, 50 years. You know, China hasn't been
Right.
involved in a
Right.
war in decades.
Right.
They're simply stacking their weapons. They're
Right.
watching from afar. They're eating popcorn right now, building
Hmm.
up their naval power while the United States depletes its inventory.
Hmm.
Right. So I'm not. I don't want to come out as a full-on Chinese shill here.
Hmm.
Because I do see a lot of weaknesses in the Chinese system.
Hmm.
But at the very least, we will see a multipolar global order, or we're already starting to see the beginning of it, right?
Hmm.
So that I think is inevitable.
Right. I mean, militarily, America has a lot of depth, right? Like they can be draining their military resources for years and they still have more than the next 10 people combined, sort of. But I haven't looked at the numbers. Uh, However, I think when hearing you talk, I kept remembering the Ottoman Empire. You know, the Ottoman Empire was around for 600 years, but for the last 100, they were called the sick men of Europe, meaning like they had all that history and inertia and respect, but in name only, right? Like they nobody treated them seriously. And then World War I came around, and it got shown actually this old man has no teeth. And with America, since Vietnam, basically, I feel like we're in that sick men of Europe um, status, just like the Ottomans were, where they had all this arrogance and they thought they had all this power, but when the real conflict broke out, they were shown to be extremely weak, and the empire collapsed. And now you have all those separate countries, Romania, Bulgaria, Turkey, Yugoslavia, etc., that were not able to stay together.
Right. Well, I
Anyway,
don't want to
yeah,
jump neither to
no,
the idea that the United
hmm
States is going to collapse, right? Like,
no,
look, the United States could have its GDP and still be the second or the
right,
first world economy, right? So,
hmm
um, but what I believe is going to have to change is the fallback from being an empire back towards becoming a republic again, right?
hmm
And which is probably going to be even better for Americans, right?
hmm
But there's an adaptation process from falling back
right,
from an empire to a country. The UK went through that process,
right,
right? It was the global power, and it slowly started to lose power. 45 was a clear defining moment where the United States
hmm
became the senior partner in the relationship, and then 56 was the final moment where the United States simply blocked a UK initiative to take over Egypt because of the Suez Canal crisis, basically taking Egypt's side against France, the UK, and Israel, right? And that is the so. Are we starting to see a Suez moment here similarly in the Strait of Hormuz? That is the theory people have been throwing around. Potentially, right? Potentially, this will be remembered or and not just the Iran war in isolation, but all these wars in conjunction as they continue in the years coming up,
hmm
as probably in other Asian countries added. and the result ends up being not necessarily a full-on American defeat. Like the UK didn't lose the Second World War; they
Right.
won,
Right.
but they still fell back in their geopolitical power, right? So maybe we do see a similar type of situation with the United States, which I think leads to an inevitable suddenly moment for the dollar, which also leads to a suddenly moment for Bitcoin. And to me, that is my life's thesis, right? I think when Satoshi saw the cracks of the financial system in 2008, and which is why he wrote Chancellor on the Brink to bail
Second
out
bailout.
banks, is because he understood the system is cracking and it's
Hmm.
only going to keep on cracking, and the other countries are going to spot the weaknesses, and
Hmm.
they're going to put pressure, and the empire is going to have to defend itself, but at some point it's going to become unsustainable. And I think that's what we're witnessing. So in my opinion, Bitcoin was designed specifically for this moment in history. It was
Hmm.
also designed, yes, to be a censorship resistant currency for individuals that want to be free, but it was mostly designed in a geopolitical changing moment,
Hmm.
which is the one we are starting to be in right now, and we're gonna be in for years to come, right? So yeah, in the end, plus this is without even talking about the fact that what happens when your country gets involved into a war. Like Ray Dalio talks about this in chapter 6 or 7 of his book, where
Hmm.
he basically signals that um, the stock market can be paused for years. It was paused in Japan, in Germany, even in the UK. It was paused,
Hmm.
suspended for years. So all your wealth you have in the stock market, it becomes inaccessible during a global war. Plus, it basically gets wiped out if your country loses the global war, which
Right.
was the case for Japan and Germany. So, and what happens with your real estate property? What happens with your corporate profits, even that get where emergency rules simply tax it at a higher threshold?
Mm.
That's why I hold Bitcoin, because first of all, it has no counterparty risk. It allows me to be free at all moments, whatever happens with geopolitics. But in 99 years out of 100, people are like, you're just paranoid about risks that are never going to happen. But in that
Right.
1 year in a hundred in a century, and where everything else is extremely risky, Bitcoin isn't, right? So Bitcoin
Hmm.
has no counterparty risk, which makes it particularly interesting at this point in history. Plus,
Hmm.
and that's even without talking about what happens after there's a resolution to the global conflict and a new geopolitical order arises, and that's when Bitcoin becomes even more interesting, right?
Right.
So in the end, to me, the answer is just clearly to buy and hold Bitcoin securely in your own self custody, as well as taking other measures to be sure you can sustain the next few years in calm as well.
Right. Because, even without a stock market closing or freezing, there's always the risk of capital controls. I mean, China already has that. Like, I mean, imagine if America instituted like stricter capital controls. All hell would break loose at that point. I mean, to me, like people would get even more scared because, we're in the midst of a bear market right now, and then there's all these conflicts happening. Doesn't that make people more hesitant or reluctant to invest or part with their money? Have you looked at that? Like, what's the money velocity right now? Because obviously in Bitcoin it's lower because we're in the bear market, but what about the other asset classes in general?
Well, like I said, first of all, the United States bond sales have decreased in interest, right?
Hmm.
Um, the yield has been going up of
Right.
the 10 year, which signals that there's just less trust into buying American bonds. So the stock market, I mean, the stock market is the success story of the current year, right?
Hmm.
With, or at least over the past 2 years, because right now there's been a little bit of a drop in the tech stocks. Um, but yeah, the AI investment thesis is the dominant one right now, and
Hmm.
will probably keep on going for at least a little while. Gold has definitely seen huge amount of interest from central banks. I think this is the moment in history where central banks hold the most gold in, I believe, in all history.
Hmm.
Plus, gold price has gone considerably up since the past few years. So I think right now the thesis is investing in gold, investing in the stock market, tech stocks specifically, right? But in I think the market has a blind spot when it comes to Bitcoin. It misunderstands that Bitcoin is the real play here when it
Hmm.
comes to geopolitical risk. Gold is too, but Bitcoin is the one with highest reward potential to related to its risk.
Mm. Okay. Okay. Uh, Earlier, you also mentioned something about a couple of Bitcoin exchanges that were closing. Do you know why?
Yeah, so BitMEX announced that it's closing shop, and also I believe it was Bitmart, which also announced that it's closing shop. Um, so look, I run a
What?
Bitcoin exchange too, and I've run a Bitcoin exchange in Canada a few years back. Plus, I've worked in other Bitcoin exchanges, so I think I kind of know how the industry works. But definitely, what we're seeing right now is a huge loss of interest, as we've covered before on this podcast, right? The crypto trading industry is simply hitting a wall right now. Okay, a lot of it's a lot of people have shifted to AI, right? People are
Hmm.
simply trading tech stocks or AI stocks, or even AI tokens that represent AI stocks, such as like trading Anthropic or Chat OpenAI on, I believe, Robinhood,
Hmm.
uh, which even Anthropic had said is not the real Anthropic stock. So, so I think the interest has shifted from crypto to AI. That is one thing. The other is that the main use case of the crypto industry has become stable coins, which are simply just extensions of the dollar, right? They
Right.
have basically declared um, they've found product market fit with stable coins. That is true, and that is a positive. But most of the crypto industry has capitulated in front of the dollar, right? No longer
Hmm.
looking for an alternative to the dollar system, to the fiat currency system, probably because they never understood Bitcoin, right? So I do think that we're also seeing that. But honestly, look, before you needed to go on an exchange to buy Bitcoin, right? I remember in 2015, the first time I bought Bitcoin, I had to go to like an equivalent of a Western Union, something called Money Mart in Canada, or
Hmm.
InstaSheks, where we would write a money order that was sent to Japan, right? And
Hmm.
then we would days later, 2 weeks later, see the money arrive in our Japanese exchange account. And then only
Wow.
we could buy Bitcoin then, right? And that
Hmm.
was the only way to buy Bitcoin in Canada in 2015. Maybe there was an ATM or so, but we went in an exchange, right? So
Hmm.
there was no Canadian exchanges which accepted like Canadian transfers, Canadian bank transfers. However, now in the United States, you can buy Bitcoin on all the mainstream apps, right?
Right. Right.
From PayPal to Cash App to Robinhood, in Canada too, right? And
Hmm.
even some banks now allow you to get into Bitcoin. The biggest bank in Mexico, BBVA, allows its customers in Spain to buy Bitcoin through it, right? People are also trading Bitcoin and cryptos and on ETFs, right? So uh, the traditional exchange business has definitely lost interest because it has now been cannibalized by or consumed by the traditional financial sector. Plus, in the face of people losing interest to trading crypto and favoring AI stocks, plus in the face of stablecoins becoming the main use case of crypto.
Hmm.
So moving away from trading to payments. Plus, my Bitcoin Maxi's point of view is that this was obviously going to happen at some point. People were going to realize that trading crypto was not a
Right.
successful endeavor, right? And it
Right.
was a scam, right? So I do think that
There's nothing there. You're just trading hot air, basically.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
So why would you trade on BitMEX, a sort of sketchy exchange, when you can just trade ETF? You can even trade derivatives, I believe, of the ETFs. Right now, there's even
Right.
futures and options markets for Bitcoin in the United States. So I think the market has simply changed, and we're in a bear market. But these are also bottom signals. Like this is clearly, in my opinion, we're clearly seeing so many bottom signals. Uh,
What's
Plus,
another
not only
bottom
the
signal?
exchanges.
Go
Excuse me.
go ahead. What's another bottom signal besides these exchanges closing?
Well, a lot of Bitcoin treasury companies are capitulating. Jack
Yeah.
Mallers announced um, he's stepping down as being CEO of 21, which
Yeah.
honestly I like Jack Mallers. I think he is a stand-up guy, but I think that the treasury companies are capitulating. I believe another one, uh, backed by Mark Moss, also
Right.
basically reimbursed its investors and closed shop this week. And that is without even talking about the fact that MicroStrategy sold Bitcoin 2 weeks ago, which we covered on the show, right? So
Right.
those are all bottom signals, certainly.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Mm, you're right. When you put it together like that, it gives me FTX vibes from the last cycle.
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's exactly
Mm,
the parallel
mm.
that is being drawn.
Which at the time, I mean, that was like the best time to buy Bitcoin, right? When Bitcoin went sub 20, uh, when FTX exploded. So, um,
Look, is this the
yeah,
bottom? I'm
yeah.
not sure, but we are
Mm,
close to the bottom. I think we'll see the
mm,
bottom over the next 6 months, right? This
mm,
might just be it. But if it's not
mm,
it, I don't think it goes beyond 6 months,
mm,
right? And like the fundamentals have simply never been stronger, right? The like and we didn't look at it like Bitcoin was simply not, unless you were like in need of censorship resistant money, which your
mm.
average Canadian or American or even Mexican simply wasn't in need of a censorship resistant money.
Right.
Yes, if you were buying drugs on Silk Road, yes, if you were in Afghanistan and you were trying to use money freely, independently of, let's say, as a woman who wants to use money and men simply don't allow her to. Uh,
Right.
so there's always been use cases for censorship resistant money, right? But but that was it. That was the
Edge
case.
cases. Yeah, edge cases.
That was the real use case for Bitcoin. Then there was people speculating on Bitcoin, and yeah, that has risen a lot of the Bitcoin value until now. But what is the next step? The next step to me clearly is Bitcoin in midst of the geopolitical situation, right?
Mm,
Bitcoin as a hedge of an asset where I can have my wealth and simply face no counterparty risk from my government, right?
mhm,
Which the stock market, the real estate market, the bond market are completely vulnerable to any government action, which is completely vulnerable to the geopolitical situation, right?
mhm.
So I think Bitcoin. We're finally seeing we're starting to begin the suddenly moment for Bitcoin. That is my impression. I think we're gonna see it over the next 3 to 5 years. Probably Bitcoin go north of $1 million United States dollars, excuse me, and that's it, right? Whether plus we're gonna also see more geopolitical changes as well that come with it, right? I think we are in the final chapter of the story. We are nearing the beginning of the final chapter of the story, and yeah, maybe it sounds a bit scary, but I think if you have some Bitcoin, you are simply hedging yourself against those risks financially.
Right. Right. I agree with that 100%. Having Bitcoin is one of the things that gives me that calm and peace to navigate through all this uncertainty. I mean, we've always had uncertainty, but there's periods where there's more uncertainty than others. And these last few years, like since COVID and onward, to me, the uncertainty just keeps increasing. And There's more chaos, more disorder. And I know there's going to be even more before things sort of calm down again and reach pre 2020 levels, you know. Yeah.
Well, there's a debate,
Yeah.
right? Was
Yeah.
it 2020? Was it 2008? Um,
I would say,
with
I mean, frankly, to me, it's like I would say 2000. It was like from 2000 and above. Like because the 90s were super stable. And then comes 2011, Patriot Act, massive surveillance, and it's been all downhill from there.
right 9/11.
Yeah.
Uh, right. Yeah,
Mm,
it seems like it, right? It seems
mm,
like 9/11, Patriot Act, Iraq War, Afghanistan War was like the first wave,
mm,
the first milestone, let's say. Then the
mhm,
second milestone was the great financial crisis.
mhm.
I would say the third milestone was the invasion of Crimea by Russia, right?
Okay.
The Ukraine, the Crimea War. Why? Because it is since the Crimea War that global military expenditure has risen year by year.
Mhm,
We are in 12 consecutive straight years of rising military expenditure, and that matches is particularly 2014, which is the beginning of the first Ukraine war, you could say, right? The Crimean War,
yeah. Well, I
when
mean,
Russia.
with inflation, everything is like all-time high. So you're saying even inflation adjusted military spending is still the highest it's ever been?
I haven't seen that exactly, okay,
Mm.
but what I see, like, I don't know exactly what inflation adjusted, but I'm pretty sure, yeah, I'm pretty sure that it would, um, right? So I'm not, but like I said, I'm not a hundred
I
percent sure.
mean, in America, definitely, right? I mean, the budget proposal went up by 50% this last budget proposal request, and then the one before was also something like 50% increase. So, uh, which, yeah, that's massive.
Yeah, no, it is in real
Mm,
terms, by the way. So it is
mhm,
accounting inflation. And excuse
mhm,
me, it's the 11th consecutive annual increase. So in 2025, the 12th would be 2026, which we don't know for
mhm,
yet, but it's a certainty, right? And that particularly matches 2014, which is the Russian annexation of Crimea, right?
mm,
So um, then comes the Trump moment, right? 2016,
mhm. Yep.
2017, and
Yeah.
then comes COVID, which is a major shift, the biggest monetary expansion in global history. And then comes the Ukraine war, which is the main war we're currently in, and the biggest war probably in Europe for sure since the Second World War.
Mhm.
And then
Right.
and then comes in the October 7th, which was the beginning of the Israeli wars, which are multi-front, right? Lebanon, Gaza, and even the annexation of Syria, or parts of Syria, right? Without even talking about Israel's involvement in the Iran war, or the fact that Israel now has bases in Somaliland, Iraq, and Azerbaijan, right? Fully acting as an empire. I would say like
Mm,
2023, October 7 marks the beginning of the Israel's beginning of sort of becoming an empire, going
mhm,
from just being a country towards trying to become at least a regional superpower, right? And now the 2026 Iran war is also a new and the third chapter to these multi wars that of the 2020 wars.
mm,
So yeah, so I do think it will we this will continue for a few years, probably 3 to 5 years. Uh, the wars will probably get uglier. Some Our countries are probably going to shift into like war mode a little bit more, a bit more control of capitals, right? More involvement
mhm,
directly from the civilians into the world, economic hit, all economic pain in general, and this will probably all lead towards of some losers and some winners, and the
mhm.
establishment of a new global currency system, a new global order, and new peace types, right?
Yeah.
Which I look very forward to. And I am not
So,
of the belief that the world's
uh-huh.
just going to get worse and worse. We just got to hit a natural. We just this is just natural a natural cycle moment in the cycle, right? We
Mhm.
gotta hit that, and then we're gonna probably see the biggest peacetime of in human history after that.
Mm. No, I'm with you on that. But one question that comes up to me as we're talking about this is, what if we're wrong? Okay, like if we're wrong, I mean, what if we're wrong? What would cause you to shift ideas? Like, what would have to happen? What would have to be true for you to shift this mindset?
Well, multiple things could happen, right? That could make
Mm,
me shift my thinking. For example, like the U.S. kicking Iran's ass,
mhm,
or like U.S. allies making clear wins, right? Boom. In 6 months, actually, Iran concedes and it's like, yeah, look, we're gonna let the United States simply dictate what happens inside and around Iran. We're gonna let
oh, that's never gonna happen. Not
right.
with
I
not with
don't
these
think that's ever
people.
gonna happen, right?
Mm,
Or Ukraine clearly wins. Like Putin basically signs a deal. Ukraine like de-escalation from the war fronts
mhm,
is simply a counter signal to my what I'm saying, right? So like
mhm,
I am saying that we are gonna witness more wars until they culminate into a global peace order, a new like winners and losers that then uh, come up with a new global war order. So de-escalation, like and considerable de-escalation, because we do go through cycles of small de-escalation, re-escalation, right? Like right now,
mhm,
Iran and the United States pausing does not contradict my thesis. A lot of people would say so, but we've seen this so many times. We know the war could start tomorrow. There's no real
mhm,
deal. Until there's a real deal, the war's not over, right?
mhm,
Um, so these are not two countries that are one next to the other, like South Korea and North Korea, who can simply pause a war without signing a peace deal. This is
mhm,
the United States, which is the leading military power, defending uh, its its position across the other side of the planet, right?
mhm,
Withdrawing from it would signal that it's simply unable to defend its system, right? So I don't think I think either massive escalation or like massive wins, early winners and losers could simply lead us to review the thesis. Also, like massive like they this is one that I like and I hope happens, but I don't think
mhm,
it will happen. Is like just AI unlocks massive growth, GDP growth of 10%. The
mhm,
United States is able to pay back its debt through tax collection on this GDP
mhm,
massive growth, right? Massive productivity gains from AI that would basically allow the US to rebalance its fiscal position.
mhm.
That would also maybe contradict my thesis. Um,
Fiscal responsibility, basically.
Not just fiscal responsibility, but just so much growth that
Mhm,
it allows the United States to pay back its debt and recover a stable position, which is not necessarily responsibility, just a success story.
okay.
Um, yeah, fiscal responsibility would also be another sort of argument here, which I think it's impossible, right? The ones that I
And
mentioned, I
yeah.
think are possible. Fiscal responsibility
Okay.
in the United States, I think is absolutely impossible. Um,
Uh,
Another one would be the collapse of the other countries, right? Like China, collapse of China. Boom, that would shift completely things.
like a spontaneous combustion? What do you mean,
Yeah,
collapse of
like a
China?
spontaneous combustion, like just a full-on collapse of China, similar to the Soviet Union collapse. Just economic collapse. Xi Jinping gets arrested. New political system. The country
Okay.
gets broken apart. Who knows, right? Just
Mhm.
a major collapse of China would
Black swan event.
simply change everything. Excuse
Okay.
me.
Like a black swan event. Like, I mean, I see as China's like cohesively super strong. But then again, people probably thought the same thing about the Soviet Union, didn't think of them like,
Right. You never
anyway, yeah.
know, right? You
You never
never
know.
know
You're
what
right.
happens.
You're
And
right.
China does have some weaknesses, but it has a lot of strengths too. So yeah, like a disintegration or collapse of China would definitely make Iran stop all its wars. Like Iran is honestly, Iran and Russia, Claudia, are in this position because China is so strong. Without
Yeah.
Chinese backing, who's gonna buy Iranian oil?
Right.
China buys 80% of Iranian's oil. It subsidizes the whole economy. Who's gonna supply? Like 90% of the materials from building the Russian weapons, or at least 90% of the weapons in Russia, can only get built with Chinese materials. Right, the
Hmm.
source of the materials for the Russian weapons is China. Who's buying
Hmm.
Russian oil? China. Right. So once
Right.
again, all of these countries that are fighting against, let's say, what from a United States point of view, the Axis countries,
Hmm.
uh, they're definitely being subsidized and backed by China. China is the senior partner in those relationships. A collapse of China would simply uh, leave them without a backer, would simply make them pull back and accept whatever deal they have, right? It's like so yeah, a collapse of China could definitely, this is what some guys like Peter Sahan would say. Okay, Peter Sahan is like, I'm not worried about this geopolitical. Maybe he's more worried now, but at least back then when I listened to him a few years back, he would say China's going to collapse. China's going to collapse over the next 10 years.
Hmm.
So this is not going to be a problem because China's simply going to collapse, and all of the countries we're fighting, they're simply proxies of China. So they're going to collapse too, right? And yeah, if you have that thesis, sure, you simply don't you simply never you can continue with this illusion that China is going to collapse, so the United States is going to remain the global dominant power, because its main enemy is going to collapse by itself. But that to me seems basically impossible too, right? So yeah, I would say, well, if I might recapitulate on what I just said, China collapsing, or Russia and Iran conceding, like collapsing too, basically, and just folding, or AI being such an economic change that it produces massive gains for the United
Hmm.
States that it can then pay back its debt, recover a good fiscal position, right? That
Yeah.
sort of thing.
I see. I mean, non-zero possibility on all of those, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Totally. Right.
Yeah.
Um, and I also like maybe the United States can also win in other positions, right? This is like, if I was looking at it from a Machiavellian point of view, or like a real politic point of view, when if I'm the United States president, I would simply be kicking everybody's ass in Latin America, which Trump has done partially,
Hmm.
but I think he could do even more, right? So that could also allow the United States to exert more revenue through
Hmm.
its control of Latin America as a whole, right? So, uh, however, like for me, the Iran war was just a massive mistake. Why even Iran never like Iran was not like, is this something you and I always discuss, right? Power versus the illusion of power.
Right.
Until the United States fought the Iran and started the Iranian war, nobody even questioned the Strait of Hormuz wasn't an international waterway, part of the global trade system protected by the United States. Nobody
Right.
even thought of that because it was the illusion of power. Iran probably always had the power to close it. They never dared to.
Right.
They didn't even believe in their own power to, right?
Hmm.
But okay, they were forced to, and now that they understand it, they will never let it go unless they're completely defeated, right? So that is also, Trump made a massive mistake because he put it in the spotlight. He put the questioning of the American power into the spotlight, which simply
Hmm.
wasn't there before. He could have left it there, and nothing would have happened, right? But who knows, right? Maybe CIA intelligence said that Iran was going to take the Strait of Hormuz anyways, right? And maybe the war was actually about that. Who knows, right? We in the end,
Right.
we don't
Is
have.
that that's I mean that's the official reason that they gave for attacking Iran is that it was imminent and the bombing of the first round was preemptive. Like this was a preemptive defense that America was doing. Frankly, they always Usually they frame it like that, right? It's not necessarily true, but um, but yeah, that's what they said. That Iran was gonna attack anyway.
Right, exactly. Um, so no, it wasn't that, Claudia. It was that Israel was gonna attack Iran. I think you got that story mixed up. What Marco Rubio said on the third day
Uh-huh.
of the attack was that Israel was going to attack anyways. So we were going to get attacked by Iran. Maybe that's what you meant. We're going to get attacked
Okay.
by Iran in the US air bases, but only after Israel would have attacked Iran.
Okay, maybe I got it confused. I do remember Marco Rubio saying that, but I mean, I thought like I mean, Israel's our ally, right? So we would know if Israel was going to attack Iran. So that doesn't make it a preemptive attack on our part.
Right, but that's the whole. And then they said they never said that, by the way. Um, then so
They,
like
they take it back. You're right.
they
They
took
make an
it back, right?
announcement. Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't know if you remember on the first days of the war, it was like full on PR panic.
Yeah.
So they were like they didn't know what they were saying, right? So they made a bunch of PR mistakes in their first days of the war, and they later tried to correct those. But I mean, the record stays. We can see the video of Marco Rubio saying that that the only reason why they attacked Iran was because Israel was gonna attack Iran, and Iran was gonna attack U.S. air bases.
I see. Yeah, no, that I mean the entire narrative has changed so many times around this war, and in the first few weeks, like it was all over the place. Also, remember that Iran had like 40 days of protests leading up to the conflict breaking out, right? Um,
Right,
so I don't know, the fact that the PR was so sketchy when this first broke out, to me, it tells me that the US reacted, not so much like purposefully had a whole program lined up behind this. Maybe like
mm.
Israel gave them a week's notice. It's like, hey, we're doing this, like with or without you.
I don't know. I don't
I
know,
don't know.
Claudia, because I
Yeah.
I do wonder. Like for example, the Maduro operation. We know that it was
Mhm.
prepared months in advance, right?
That obviously how was like super prepared, Th- right? There's no improvisation there. It was very surgical.
Right. So you're
But
right. I know. I understand.
but the Iran one, like it was meant to be surgical, and because they kept saying 2 weeks, right? And
Right.
obviously not. And to me, the Iranians are hurting. It definitely, yes. I'm not gonna pretend they're not. But from a power projection perspective, America's the one that is hurting. Like America's power diminishes every day. The perception of American power diminishes every day that we're involved in this conflict.
Yeah.
Because I mean, we've been talking about it for an hour, right? Um, So America is the one that is most incentivized from a power perspective to end this quickly, right? How like I mean this is
Right. No. 100.
Vietnam 2.0, you know. How can a country in the middle of nowhere? I mean, Iran is not a country in the middle of nowhere, but to draw the parallel with Vietnam, how can we be embroiled in this for so long with no end in sight?
Right. Afghanistan even
Mhm.
worse.
Right.
Um, we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Hmm.
Uh, I'm just gonna keep on holding Bitcoin,
Yeah.
and that's
Yeah.
it.
That's the
All right.
takeaway, right? Hold
Yeah.
Bitcoin.
That's always the takeaway.
HODL. Yeah.
All
Mm.
right. Great
Anything else you want
episode.
to add? Yeah. Yeah,
No,
great
that's
episode.
it. We're coming out with a report from the audio team tomorrow morning on basically how wealth works in Mexico. The takeaway is that it's basically all concentrated in real estate, unlike in the United States where financial assets dominate. Here in Mexico, financial assets compose a very little portion of people's portfolios, and it's
Hmm.
by far which is real estate is by far the main asset in Mexican wealth. So stay
Mm.
tuned for that, and that's it for us this week. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for watching. And Gustavo, amazing talking with you, as always.
Yeah, thanks.
See you next week.